We're
Thank
going to
you.
finish up part 2. It would be hard. It would be hard not to. I don't know. I won't say anything. I think this is a timely study. I'll just say that it's a timely.
Mm-hmm.
No
All
shit.
right. Yeah. All right. We got as what we got to. I think we got to 11 on page 42. The
Yes.
value of an ordinary life over a famous life. There's a little pyramid there. A reminder that Jesus probably was not speaking to, I don't know how he said it, wealthy Romans or educated Athenians. Anything you all want to say about it?
I really like this. It reminds me of when I was little, and when you're little, you think, well, I can be an astronaut. I can be a rock star. I can be a movie star. Of course you can. Anybody can be that. And then now I'm, 50 years later, and you think, well, I didn't quite manage that, but I really kind of like the life I have. Living in a quiet little mountain town and a, nice, easy but small house, and with my dog and my husband, and it's pretty quiet. But I like this life. But if you had asked 10-year-old Ruth, I wouldn't have thought this was very exciting.
I'm having a little trouble seeing you in a spacesuit and going up in space.
Now I might rather be a movie star.
I could get there though, so
I have no problem seeing her doing that at all.
Well,
I get claustrophobic.
I'm thinking being on the vestry for 3 years and managing the barn for 2 of those might be more difficult than going to space.
Thank you. Part of why I'm really happy to be sitting in my house reading a book.
In other words, Ruth, we see you as a rock star.
Yeah,
so
we do.
That's cool.
We do.
But you know what I mean? Like you realize the beauty and value of being an ordinary person and not having to be in that race for what the world values and thinks is great. It's more what I think that's what this passage is saying, that an ordinary life can be a godly life.
Or a necessary one. I think that's later on in this section, is that we really can't exist without either salt or light.
Right.
Particularly first century, where they didn't have refrigeration or ways to preserve other than salt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the only thing I know that dispels darkness is what? Is light.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But can I tell you one other little thing about Nerdy Ruth too? So
Yeah.
You can tell I've been sitting in my house by myself. Need to talk to you. So rather than doing a New Year's resolution, which I don't really keep and I always forget kind of by February, I decided I was going to have a theme or a motto. And my motto, without knowing about this book and everything, is be the light and look for the light. And so every morning, or when I'm getting frustrated about something or whatever, I think, wait, what's the light here? Where's the light? And you could throw salt in there too. So it's pretty easy.
That's right.
Allison, I love the sentence, Jesus affirms the world-shaping value of ordinary people who follow the ways of an extraordinary God.
Mm-hmm.
That just immediately made a lady pop into my mind that worked at the driver's license bureau, which when we moved to Atlanta, we had to get new tags, new stuff like that. And all these people were waiting and they were frustrated. And she had the most gentle, calming spirit. I thought, man, I bet this lady is a Christian, because she just radiated peace in the middle of all this frustration. And, I was smiling by the time I left her booth. And I,
Either
and,
that or she was on something really good.
no, it was not artificial. It was coming from love. You just, love exuded from her pores. It was just, and I immediately thought of her.
Hmm.
I would want to be a license plate, um, lady, but boy, did she spread light.
Yes. I think, and that goes back to the text in that Jesus was not speaking to the hand-chosen anyone. I mean, that wasn't the crowds, right? The crowds were not some sort of hand-picked, we're only going to be talking to Pharisees today, or only whatever. It doesn't matter. We could call them whatever, right? He was talking to everyone. And how helpful is that for us today? And I think that goes to what you're saying, Lawson, and to what you said, Ruth, is that you find your place in there somehow. Is it easier for us to find our place in that I am light, or I am salt, or I am light and salt?
And I don't think he was unintentionally not speaking to the 1%. They probably just weren't as open to listen because they may have thought maybe that they knew more, didn't need to listen to, more threatened by someone who's enlightening crowds who need to be kept dumb.
He's giving, in a sense, I'm going to use the word power, but maybe that's not the right word. But he's ability. He's just giving agency. Maybe that's the best word. He's giving agency to anyone who was listening.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, it doesn't matter if you're the astronaut or whatever you are. Every person has this. Every person has salt and light. Mm-hmm. And whether you choose to use it, like the woman at the license bureau, right? That's kind of, sometimes life circumstance gets in the way, but it is kind of a choice we can make to be salt and light.
Well, he says, rather, that salt and light are the outcomes of ordinary lives lived in a rich communion with God.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a good place to be.
Yes, a relationship, right? That's what that says. What is the relationship? Not about what you have achieved or earned or been given or any of that. It's about the relationship with God. A cultivated relationship.
Well, I hear what Lawson's saying about the ordinary people, and I just want to tell this story from Dallas. When we were out there and I was working there, in a hurry to grab some lunch and get back for a staff meeting, and went to my usual haunt, the Taco Bell, and the line was all the way around the building to the road. And I thought, I'll never make it, but I got in the line anyway. It never stopped moving. It stayed moving the whole time. I got up to the window, and here's a lady who's maybe, I don't know, 35 or so, Hispanic lady, and I picture her with 3 or 4 kids at home, and a spouse or not, I don't know. Anyway, they hand me my food instantly. And I said to her, I can't believe this. I just want to thank you so much. This line was so fast. And she cocked her head and she said, "Yes, ma'am, we're Taco Bell."
Ding.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, you are. And so I pulled my car around and parked and went in. At this point, I had a management job there in staff development. But so I went in and asked to talk to the manager. And I said, I want to talk to you about one of your employees. And he said, oh, what'd they do wrong? And I said, probably took a job here with you. But I tell you what this lady said, and, I said, I don't know how you get somebody for whatever, $7, an hour, to advertise your entire company. But, if you don't want her, I think there's a place at our company for her.
Oh,
Can you
wow.
imagine? I mean, I know that lady was making nothing, and she pulled that attitude up and was so proud to have that uniform on. Made my whole day.
Self-awareness too, yeah. Self-awareness, just, she knew. She's got it.
It's crazy.
Keep going.
This
Yeah.
man, we're talking
Salt and light.
Right on.
This man, we're
Plenty of salt
church.
anyway.
Salsa too.
Definitely salt in Taco Bell.
I love Taco Bell.
Here we go. Good.
Okay, anything else on chapter 12
Oh,
11.
or 11? Sorry.
well, that's where you were talking about the people could have happened now that they feel like their rights were taken away, that they didn't have the didn't have the right to speak to the people, so they when you said this, what this last election was all done on, was that they had not become a part of this. And
Right.
they just, I had that written down on this page. I hope that's where you were talking.
Well, we're gonna go on to the next chapter on chapter 12.
So Allison, can I say one more thing about 11?
Absolutely.
That reminds me, just real quickly, I think it was Francis of Assisi that said we should preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words.
That's great.
It's wonderful.
Yes.
Mm.
All right, 12. Why do we do what we do? I guess it could be another chapter heading. And if Jesus was serious, then we will seek God's glory rather than our own. And this is hard for us, and maybe like a lifelong journey there. First, we have to recognize the importance of intent. The author talks about how that in a few more sentences, Jesus says, and when you pray, go into your room quietly in secret and pray to your Father in heaven. And when you give secretly. And then at this point, he's saying, but don't cover up your light. You know, let your light shine. Let the city on the hill be a beacon for others. So he says it's about intent. Is our intent for our own glory, or is it for the glory of God? That sounds like a good rubric, doesn't it? I mean, a good way to sort of take the time to evaluate that. When we're engaged in something. I have to think about it when I'm about ready to open my mouth. Is it for my glory or someone else's?
Yeah. Allison, I think it's hard because, we generally like to get recognition for what we do. And sometimes you think, oh gosh, I should just do everything secretly then so nobody knows. But it is hard to do that.
It is.
Well,
It is. But it is a way that might keep us attached to the one that we'd like to give glory to. You know, I think often things that are harder for us are the ways that God helps us stay attached to God. As if it were just too easy, what would be the need for the attachment? So, that's how I try to self-regulate or reimagine or redirect myself, right? Like, oh, if I've gone down this path quite a ways without even thinking about God's glory, or maybe I don't use the words quite that way, but in connection with this chapter, I would say it like that. Yeah.
well, my grandfather, may rest in peace, after he died, there were several articles that were written. People came out and said, you know, when our house burned, we got there was money that was sent, blah, 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 and we never knew who did it. And just different people came in and said different things had been done for them, and that it was all done anonymously. And the man who was writing the story said, but those of us who got to administer those gifts knew that it was Nathan Goldman who was sending money and whatever these people needed. And so he did it all without, and he was Jewish. But he took care of people that were in need, but he took no credit for it. That's why
So the
favorite.
the question that I wrote for this, Kate, was, so it sounds to me like your grandfather was very important in your spiritual formation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's my love.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's true. If you all could name the people who have been important in your spiritual formation, I imagine they are people who did things for the glory of God as opposed to their own glory. Right?
Mm-hmm. I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Someone who was important in your own formation?
When I was much younger, I was working for a church, and the Father John, I mean, he did all these things, and he just sort of set this example of servant ministry. He just, you know, he would stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning making cookies for the kids the next day. He had the sweeping and the broom, and he just, it was unbelievable to watch him in action. And I said, well, he's the priest. Okay. That's quite a lot to follow. And it really ingrained in me this idea of serving. And we're all called, whether we're the priest or we're a Persian or we're just a visitor, we're all called at any moment to serve. And that's what I learned from him. That's a great formation person. That's someone that really, yeah. And then he learned how to play the guitar. You don't know how to play the guitar? I know I had to learn how to play the guitar because he had to sing for all these kids. And so he really stretched what it meant to be a servant leader.
Allison, I think about, and I know I've told this before, but Corrie ten Boom and all that she did for Jewish people. And she was asked as she was giving a lecture in her later years, gosh, how do you handle all of the thank yous and the praise and everything that you get? You led such a wonderful life and done so much for so many people. And she said, I take each compliment as a flower. And at the end of the day, when I go to bed, I give that bouquet to God.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
That's lovely.
Mm.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
That really does exemplify this chapter.
I mean, it really does, because, you know, they said there were people coming up to her, you know, to tell her how wonderful she was. And just one of them had the guts to say, how do you handle this? You know, with everybody been telling you all the time, every time you go to speak. And that's what she said. I collect them and give my bouquet to God.
That's what a metaphor.
Yeah. Anything else about this chapter? We're doing very well, you all. I want to say it's going to get more difficult.
Yeah.
I do have one other little person that it's just in the way that I met her. when we started going to church in, I have to think about which town it was, Chicago. And we drove a long way to get to that church. Because there was a not very nice church. Wait, but that's another story. And I met her when I went there to see what it was like, and she was the sexton. I mean, that's the right word, right? We don't have one. But she cleaned the church and took care of the church, and isn't that what you call a sexton?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So she showed us around, and she was cleaning and all this stuff. And so we went that Sunday, and there she goes down the aisle, and she was the deacon at the church, one of 5, and there were 2 men that would not serve with her because they didn't want to be on the altar with a woman, much less the sexton. And she was incredible. Then it turns out that she's the one who leads the catechesis, and she is also the one who had started EFM and needed somebody to help her start another group, and I'd already done EFM. So anyway, I had all this man at this other church wanted her diaconate taken away because she was a woman. I mean, it just got to be very amazing, but she just kept keeping on, and the strength that she showed through everything, that she knew what she was doing, and she was doing it right. And if being the sexton of the church was one of them, she was something. And I think that she formed a lot of, it's okay to do whatever it takes to get stuff done.
Yeah,
She does it for the glory of God. And
right.
Ruth
In the
was
face of some pretty big odds and pretty big resistance. So yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Ruth, the Reverend Ruth Blair.
Well, I hope that spurs you to think about, if you hadn't yet, spurs you to think about those people in your life who have had that role for you, who have been salt and light. If it's like Lawson's gal at the license at the DMV, or, you know, Kate's experience with the deacon in her church, or the Taco Bell gal, or somebody you read about, maybe it's even somebody that you knew personally, right? Maybe it's someone like Corey Tender whose actions and witness to the world have really been something that marks your life in a certain way. So do consider that, because we and that you might also, I would say the other part of this is, you, not because you need the glory, but you might also be that for other people.
As other people have been for you.
Yes.
And I think that ties in with the previous one, the ministry of the laity, that who in our church right here, I'm thinking about someone who's now the doctor,
Yeah.
Ginger,
Right.
someone who died, Marty White.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are people who are, and then the saints among us, you know.
Absolutely. There's quite a few in that room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or on the screen.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just have to give a little of that glory to my mother, who every time we would walk in the house and there would be some wonderful smell of something baking or something, we'd go in and reach for it, and my mother would say, that's for a lady. That became a thing it
For a
all
lady.
has. That's for a lady. But she, she was always cooking or, doing something for, making a birthday cake for somebody in AA who's celebrating their 10th uh, anniversary of, sobriety, or, she wasn't a member of AA, but she worked with people. She was just one of those people who gave. She had plenty to do raising these crazy 4 children, but she was able to give a good part of herself to the glory of God. People called her an angel.
Yeah, that certainly wouldn't be a personal, well, I'm doing this to be better, good, above.
Right.
I'm doing it to celebrate their accomplishment and their walk path with God, not necessarily mine. It's about them lifting it up.
Right.
That's a big one.
That is a big one.
Yeah.
Well, and think about all of our casseroles downstairs and soups that are given out, and when it's given to someone, they have no idea who made it.
Right.
No idea.
Okay. Well, we're gonna go to 13. This is a little bit trickier. He talks about evangelism and justice, and that one is neither more important than the other. And I think, Irv, probably this really resonated with you, because that last little train illustration on page 46 shows love as the engine and justice and evangelism as the cars behind it. Not one leading another, but leading with love, and therefore then we can both, the author uses evangelism as in, more of a personal relationship with God, seeking God's forgiveness, and living into that relationship, and then justice meaning doing that for the community, right, for others. So not one more important, both necessary, but both driven by the engine of love.
And push pull. So the love, they pull, the momentum from evangelism and justice will push love forward. as
Oh,
well.
nice.
That's a good way to look at it.
Say it again,
Nice.
please, Kevin.
Yeah, so love may be the engine that starts it up. I think I can. With the evangelism and justice, then getting momentum behind love. Those cars then in turn keep pushing. So they're all,
That's
they're
great.
all, they're all in tangent. They're pushing, they're pulling, which is, that's just the way, the yin and yang, that's the way things work.
Mhm.
You must have read the book of The Little Engine That Could or something.
I think I can.
We all have to, I mean,
I knew I could.
yeah.
Because I wonder if grandchildren have, because it's not a trendy book, right?
Boy, is it relevant every day.
I know. I may have to go buy this for my grandchildren now.
What was the other one that we weren't allowed to say can't? Did you remember that?
Can't never did anything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We, Leaf Monroe's book on, the garden of weeds that you're not supposed to say,
Yeah.
like ain't, can't.
Yeah.
Look,
My grandmother read that one to me.
That was a good one. And if you think you can't,
You
you're
won't.
probably right.
Yep.
Henry Ford.
So again, salt and light, the author uses salt and light to talk about how that will also be what motivates love. Salt and light. Because the salt, as we talked about, prevents decay, stops things from decaying. And light is necessary when there is darkness. So not just a metaphor in that sense, but also a real reality.
Mhm.
You know, you know, uh, 'cause, you know, the, the garden of weeds that you're not supposed to say, like ain't, can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, salt and light, the author uses salt and light to talk about how that will also be what motivates love. Salt and light. Because the salt, as we talked about, the salt,
Well, I will tell you that I've never always thought of love as being in such a strong way until I started taking these classes with Irv, and now everything I read, I start thinking about, but what would Irv say? This, it really is kind of weird, but I think of that because of him. When I read this stuff, I always wonder how love actually, where it begins and what it does, and different kinds of love. And so I thank you for that. I'm so glad you're in all these classes.
Well, I enjoy
What a
it.
great witness. What a great witness.
Well,
Love and be kind. Well, those are the two things, yep, from Irv.
Yeah.
I told somebody yesterday, in my spiritual journey, I used to think that we were created with the capacity to love. And now I've evolved into thinking we are created as love. It goes well beyond the simple idea of capacity, but we are created as love, and that we have to take our lives and choose to use our lives that way. But it's already embedded in us and throughout us. It's what we are, really. I think I've kind of come to that. So,
Well, it would, if we want to think about that theologically, I understand this exactly that way, that if we are created in the image of God, then yes,
right.
we are love. There's no doubt about it. All right, 14. We might get caught up there.
Hey, I just want to say something. I don't want Sharon to get too many ideas about the speed that we're doing this with. This would screw up our Monday class altogether. So,
I have no doubt, Irv, that my classes will be, we will have finished 6 or 7 of them before you all get to before you get to step 7.
oh, I think you'll be way ahead of that. So,
Yeah.
Say with love.
Different.
but it's I mean, these are two different things, and they each have their own place and their own speed. So
Different intention.
that's not a complaint. That's simply just
It
a little
is.
jest.
I'm just trying to keep you
Observation.
there, that's all.
You're keeping your Mondays tied up. All right.
Sit down, Leonard, chasing.
Yeah. So again, if Jesus was serious, then we must not withdraw from our culture. Now, this isn't really
Amen.
Episcopalian as much as many other faith traditions, right? I mean, ours is not one that's been outside of culture, but for many other people, or you may have come from those traditions, that there's a real push there. And I appreciate him saying that we can find some support for being in culture in the Sermon on the Mount.
Allison, this really strikes me with what happened the other day with the bishop in Washington, saying, hey, it says at the end of this, when things go wrong, we ought to stop with self-reflection. Where were the Christians? And she stood up and
Yeah.
she did say something.
Absolutely.
She just took my breath away. I hope
Yeah.
somebody doesn't kill her, but she was wonderful.
I hope so too. But that's a thing, and the pushback that we get from that, this chapter and the next one, I think are very poignant for us over these last few days. And as we go through and think about, do we stay in anger, because that's a chapter to come, or do we not? And we can't stay in anger. I think that I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but because our anger turns to resentment and
Fear.
and fear. So we have to recognize it, and then we have to figure out what is the righteous thing to do, what is the just thing to do, what is the merciful thing to do. Yeah.
Well, and of course, I liked this section because it says that you have to use and understand the Old Testament. It's the foundation for understanding what Jesus says. And what he said is that he didn't come to do away with all that happened in the Old Testament. He just came to fulfill it. And that does not, and I like the way he explained, fulfillment does not mean to finish and throw away, but to bring to completion. In other words, Jesus identifies himself as what the Old Testament has been pointing toward. And to understand Jesus, we must see him through the lens of the writings of the law and the prophets. And I said, hooray. I mean, to me, that was really important.
You're a chapter ahead of us.
I know, I was gonna say.
I'm on 15. Where are you?
We're on 14.
14.
Well, for once in my life, I was ahead.
Sorry.
I did. It was probably my fault. I did jump ahead.
Yeah, we'll let you have it.
Okay.
Blame you.
Well, in that reading, we know that the problems of the world are overwhelming, and one of the responses to that is to do what? Is to withdraw. Right? Or to blame,
Right.
or to be disengaged. And that's not what we can do. We have to do, again, I'm gonna go back to Lawson's example of her gal at the DMV. Right? Someone who works at the DMV could become disengaged. Could become, right? We've seen them, right? No, that is not what she did. She loved through that. We love through that.
Well,
We love, and that doesn't mean you have to, not say hard things. I don't want to be misinterpreted that there aren't hard things to say in love. There are hard things to say.
Well, that's why, yeah, so I reflected this on, you can talk about the world, but you also can start very personal with yourself and your spouse or your family. And when things get tough, do you just want to shut up and drop the conversation or what, which is not good because you're withdrawing from it? Or do you really need to, you may need to cool off, but you still need to engage in the issue or the topic at hand.
Or the healing process.
Yeah. And even if that's your own healing, right? That may not be healing the world. That may not be healing your next door neighbor or your spouse, but it might be your own healing.
And if you're broken, most likely you really can't do a lot for the world.
And illustrations really are strong in how simple they are, because the hexagon is the most strongest bonding, unmovable shape. Stronger than a triangle, circle, square. It is perfect. And once it's perfectly set, it's very difficult to change. So if you get into a bad spot, it's a very difficult thing to move it so that it gets righted. That's a good way to put it. So that it can change. Because once it's locked in, and the reason I say this is because this is the shape of a beehive, a colony.
Yes, it is.
The cells they make are perfectly held, weighted equally. And if they get out of whack, to get them righted is a very tough challenge. And once you're stuck with it. It's like, how do I get this perfect shape to be unperfect so I can get it righted?
Thanks.
So,
I love it in nature. I love that.
a bee without a brain to do it.
No, I knew that was, like, I was thinking of it like molecules or what, how they attach and all that, right?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Wow.
Equally distribution.
Wow.
Nice.
Number 14, right?
That's number 14, 48.
I wish I could read what was inside of each of those little hexagons.
Yeah, I have to have a magnifying glass. You got one? Yeah.
And your phone light,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's so good.
Hey,
I couldn't read them.
Who said they could read them?
No, she said it's hard to read.
Can you read
No, I
those?
said, no, I said it was hard to read. I thought somebody said, oh, I can read them. I was gonna say,
Kevin's young eyes.
No, they're about ready to get off
Not anymore.
there. Yeah, right. You
What happens when you have a birthday, right? They get old,
Right.
don't
That's right. It's just like that, too. Let me tell you.
Another trip run, son.
Yeah. Okay. How about 15 then? And then
Yeah.
Kate, you started us off real well on 15. That the whole Bible, how much of the Bible do we read?
Boomerang it.
Right? We read Genesis, he says, or we might read a few Psalms, or we might read the Gospels and a few epistles. Yeah, a very small sliver of the 66 books of the Bible.
We get Exodus every year with Charlton Heston.
Yeah, we have a cultural interpretation of a lot of our scripture. That's true.
well, if you take EFM, my good old EFM, you start at the beginning and you read every chapter. And there are stories, and I mean, I'm sure most of you probably in this group have read the entire Bible, but the looks on people's faces when they got to some of the stories in the Old Testament, they kind of go, well, woohoo. A priest said, I got a lot of more people to pay attention to the Bible when I would go off of script and read them some of the stories that they didn't know were in there. And it cost a lot of attention. And I taught a class one time called The Sexy, Wild, Crazy Women of the Old Testament. And it was a big hit. So you do need that Old Testament there as a foundation, because Jesus had it as a foundation.
Absolutely have it, all of it. The law, the prophets, the Psalms, the wisdom literature, the poetry, just had all of that. Very complete. The history in some parts. I wondered if you handed out like a golden steak to all the people who came to class, Kate, to celebrate Deborah and her.
Absolutely.
Well, in seminary, there were people who were very, very, very challenged. It's an Episcopal seminary, but there were still several people who found it very hard to think about interpreting scripture or reading scripture in a different way, even at that level. At which time every professor would say, not sure you're ready for this.
5 verses of Leviticus.
Yeah, it's just, there's like a lot. There's like a lot or something. So
I had a woman in my first EFM class that I ever taught, and she had been reared as a Southern Baptist, and we were in Chicago, and she was from Alabama, and she asked me if she could take the class, and I said, Barbara, I am delighted for you to take the class. I'm just afraid that it might be more than you anticipate. I mean, and she said, no, I want to do it. I said, okay. And the first week she walked in after some readings that we had done, and she said, do we have to start at the very beginning of the Bible? Where they have the stuff that's not real? And I said, well, that's where we're starting. You don't have to. And the next week she came in and she said, I have to give up Noah, huh? And I said, well, No, you want to tell me about Noah. You know, I mean, the struggle I saw this woman going through to try to put together the two parts of what she had been taught and what someone had forgotten to teach her.
Yeah.
But she ended up a wonderful, wonderful student, and she was so joyful when she finally got the whole picture, or not the gospel according to Kate, but she was happy to have realized that somebody had forgotten to tell her the first chapters of the book.
Well, how does the Old Testament help us understand Jesus?
Well, I find especially like in Isaiah, a lot of what he says is, just kind of a forecast of
Foreshadowing.
what's going to come with Jesus.
You know, it once said, Allison, that I mean, I've heard people say that they went back and they stuck stuff into Isaiah because they wanted it to be that. Have you don't think that? I mean, there's nothing to that, but I do think.
Well, I don't think that Isaiah was the only one.
No.
So, no, many of the prophets, that was a long-standing, understanding in Jewish tradition, was that, a Messiah will come.
Yeah.
Right? That wasn't something that just sprung out of Isaiah's writings or from people in the first century trying to make it work, make it line up. Good Lord, for the last 2 millennia, people have tried to make it line up. I mean, but again, Jesus wasn't pointing to himself ever. We've done that work afterward.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was always pointing back to God. He wasn't pointing to himself. He never said, worship me. He didn't, that's not what he said. What was the intent of his instruction was how we should treat other people. Right? That the majority of his conversations and teachings and healings and all that was just about how we should be around other people, what our community should look like.
Yeah.
We have chosen as Christians to worship Jesus, to praise him, to remember him in particular ways, particularly in our tradition, right? We remember him through the Eucharist and so forth. So through our sacraments, but maybe in John's gospel, there's a bit about the worship part. I mean, Paul certainly did his fair share of figuring out how we were going to worship Jesus. The letters and the epistles do that a bit more, but definitely not the synoptic gospels. That's not the writer's intent. So
That's interesting.
yeah. I mean, read it for yourselves, right? Read it and interpret, ask in your prayer life to think about that, More often than not, where Jesus is telling us about who is our neighbor, how we should treat our neighbors, who's who's benefiting, who should benefit, what our job is. To be salt and light as we close out, we only have one more reading in this, in part 2, so. Which is, if Jesus was serious, there is a difference between doing good and being good. And sometimes one takes us to another one. Sometimes doing good gets us to being good. But always being good gets us to doing good.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Sometimes doing good gets us to self-righteousness.
Yes, that's true too.
I felt like this, and I mean, that's what I get out of the gospel, and particularly Paul's letters, is this whole idea of what's in the heart. And it seems to me that the law, any law, with law, you can have loopholes. You can always find a way around the law or way to justify this or that. But you don't have that ability with the heart.
Right.
Interesting.
Do you have a personal example of that?
Oh, I mean, I think I just see it all over. I mean, that's to me the kind of the definition of law. That's the problem with the law, is that you try to be specific, but you can't anticipate all the specificities, and the specifics of all the law don't really get so much to the intent, maybe a little bit, but the heart does. Just a big contrast to me between the heart and the law.
Yeah, I'm not sure how this fits, but I remember a teaching about all this, that if the law is what the gospel is all about, if what our lives is center around is following the law, it will lead to one of two things: either self-righteousness, I do this pretty well, better than most people, or despair, I can't do this, I might as well not try. I mean, if the law is what it's all about, it's not a good result. That's why Jesus fulfilled the law, and it's about what's in the heart.
But the law is necessary.
Yes, not to just
Yeah.
discard it, but not to put it on the
Is
the
Yeah.
sort of there are people who live by the law who are hammer people in the head with it. It's not what it's all about. It's the result. It's the result of our faith and our love.
Without the heart, the law is cold.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly the next, and certainly in the next set of readings, there's a lot more about that, about the law and how that affects us, about self-righteousness and how we deal with that. Would someone in the room read, can we read, if we start with part 3 on page 54?
Oh, wait a minute, now you're getting ahead of it.
Yeah, I am getting it.
The orange page.
The orange page, part 3, Inside Out Righteousness. This are the next 16 chapters in Matthew. Lyda, can I start with you? Just
Yes, read the first paragraph.
Yeah.
You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you're going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly, I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny.
You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better if you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell.
It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery.
Again, you have heard that it is said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of a great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil.
Well, it's 11 o'clock.
Well, thanks.
They bless it.
So we're now just getting to where we were start to be, but I will say that the illustration on page 56 of 3 angry mice with handguns.
3 blind mice.
Three blind angry mice. Don't worry, they're righteous, it says,
Yeah,
even if they're blind,
with their gun.
right?
They can't see.
They, well, he uses that as,
Oh, I love it.
there was a Supreme Court somewhat ruling that a blind
Ruling, oh my God.
could be a concealed carry.
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you all. What a great conversation today. I hope this spurred things that will be going through just today, this hour, but it will inform you and inform conversations that you have with other people as we go through this. I can't guarantee we're going to ever catch up, but we're going to do our best. So do read part 3 and part 4 for next week. I will send to Carrie to post to the website this bit from Brian McLaren about being salt and light in the community,
Yeah.
and why the Center for Contemplation and Action chose that theme for this year. So we'll go be salt and light.
Where we are.
Okay.
Peace.